France, Sweden, the Netherlands, you've heard about attacks on women, about neighborhoods where police are afraid to enter, about New Year's Eve in Cologne, where hundreds of women were assaulted in a single night by organized groups of men, about shootings in Sweden that make international headlines. You're right. Something is happening. And I could get a lot of views by simply telling you that immigration is destroying the West. I could scare you with shocking stories, pick the worst incidents, show you the most disturbing images. But I'm not going to do that, because I take you seriously. And because you came to this channel looking for truth, not sensation. So I want to explain this to you the way I'd explain it to a friend. We're walking through a forest together. No cameras, no agenda, just two people trying to understand something complicated. Socrates said that a philosopher isn't someone with a degree. A philosopher is someone who searches for understanding, who searches for wisdom. That's what we're doing here. What you're about to hear is not what the right tells you. And it's not what the left tells you, because both sides are telling you half the truth. And it's the half they're not telling you that matters most. So listen. Let me tell you the whole story, from the beginning. The year is 1945. Europe is in ruins, 60 million dead, concentration camps, cities flattened. And the greatest minds of the Western world ask themselves one question: how did this happen? And what do we do to make sure it never happens again? The answer they found was logical. It was human. And it came from real profound pain. They said the cause was hatred of the other, nationalism, fear of what was foreign, the belief that my people matter more than yours. And so they began building a Europe that would teach the opposite. In the schools of Germany, France, the Netherlands, entire generations were raised in the spirit of tolerance, openness, respect for difference. This wasn't propaganda. It was a sincere attempt to answer the greatest tragedy in history. And for decades, it worked. But then something started going wrong. Quietly. Because anyone who tried to talk about it was immediately accused of racism, of xenophobia, of lacking empathy. And that silence, that imposed politically correct silence, was perhaps the greatest mistake the West ever made. Let's start with hard facts. In Sweden, immigrants make up 18% of the population, but 33% of those in prison. The rate of assault among immigrants is 3 times higher than among native Swedes. In 2024, Sweden recorded almost 300 shootings. In Germany, foreigners make up 12% of the population, but over 40% of criminal suspects. In France, foreigners make up less than 9% of the population, but over 26% of prisoners. These are facts. They cannot be ignored. But now let's move from statistics to the street, because this is where you need to really pay attention. In Sweden, the police maintain an official list of what they call vulnerable areas. In 2021, there were 61 of them. These are neighborhoods where emergency services know they are at risk when they enter, where ambulances and fire trucks request police escorts because there have been ambushes, where officers responding to calls are met with stones and bottles. The authorities officially avoid the term no-go zone. They say sensitive areas. But the deputy head of the Belgian police union said it plainly. In Brussels, there have been zones where it's better not to go for over 20 years. And politicians have spent years telling us they don't exist. And there is something else. Something darker. Something almost nobody talks about loudly enough. The gangs operating in these areas, real, organized, sophisticated gangs, have learned to exploit one specific gap in European law: the protection of minors. They outsource the most dangerous work to children. Literally, children under 15 years old. Because they know the legal system won't touch them the same way. That a 13-year-old convicted of murder faces a different consequence than an adult. And that a 13-year-old from a neighborhood with no future, no prospects, raised in an environment where the gangster is the only authority figure, is easy to recruit. Through Snapchat, through TikTok, with the promise of money and respect. Swedish police confirmed. Since 2019, the number of suspects under 18 in firearms crimes has doubled. And a new trend has emerged. Suspects under 15 receiving orders from gang leaders who operate outside Sweden entirely, managing operations through encrypted apps, risking nothing themselves, using a child as the instrument. This is not a problem with immigrants. This is a problem with a generation that grew up in a ghetto, literal and mental, for whom the gang became the only structure offering belonging, identity, and a future. And this brings us to the philosophical question at the heart of all of this. Consider a person raised in a culture where the family, not the court, delivers justice, where clan honor matters more than state law, where prison is not punishment but a rite of passage. Can that person simply adopt European legal values because they now live in Europe? The answer that reality gives us is brutal. Not automatically. Not because they are bad people, but because their entire lives they were taught a different code. And nobody, literally nobody, invested in changing that code. Teachers in these neighborhoods speak of helplessness. Classrooms where 20 of 30 students don't speak the language of the country they were born in. Where adult authority is constantly challenged. Because at home, they see a model where strength and clan decide everything, not institutions. Where every attempt to enforce rules escalates into something the teacher cannot handle alone. Police officers say the same. About the lack of tools. About entering these areas knowing they are being watched, tracked, catalogued by a network that operates more efficiently than many corporations. And ordinary people, neighbors, shop owners, women afraid to go out after dark, feel completely alone. Because the institutions that were supposed to protect them either cannot or refuse to admit the problem exists. How did we get here? Through a mistake made over decades. The belief that goodwill is enough, that providing housing and benefits is enough, that if we give people the material conditions, integration will happen by itself. It didn't. Because integration is not a one-time act. It is a process that requires effort from both sides, and it requires something the West refused to say out loud for decades, that there are conditions, that you can live here, work here, build a life here. But you must respect the laws and values of the country that accepted you. Not just the criminal code, but fundamental values, equality of men and women, freedom of speech, the rule of law. This is not cultural colonialism. It is the minimum that any society has the right to demand from those who live within it. That condition was never stated clearly, because stating it was racism. And that silence created the space in which no-go zones, children used as gang soldiers, and helpless teachers became the reality of daily life in parts of Western Europe. Now look at countries like Poland. Despite a massive influx of Ukrainian refugees, over 2.5 million in recent years, overall crime rates have actually fallen. Why? One key variable. The majority of those who arrived were women and children. Not large groups of young men without legal status, without prospects, without a path forward. Demographics matter. Context matters. But the debate in Eastern Europe too often pretends this couldn't happen here. That we're safe by default. That we can afford to make the same mistake, ignoring the problem until it becomes too large to fix. We can, but we'll pay the price. The lesson from the West is simple and brutal. Integration without conditions is not integration. It is the creation of parallel societies that live side by side, but never together. And from that side by side, over time, comes exactly what we see every day in the news from France, Sweden, and the Netherlands. This isn't about fear. It's not about hatred. It's about honest conversation. About what works and what doesn't. About what we ask of those who come, and what we owe them in return. About the fact that openness without principles is not a value. It is an invitation to chaos. Leave a comment and tell me in one sentence. Do you think the West still has time to find the right answer? Subscribe, because these questions matter for your world and your life. See you in the next one.